Hello and welcome to OT, the podcast. We're here to talk about watches, time and how to spend it. My name is Andy Green.
Felix Schultz, reporting for duty.
At ease.
Always
How you going,
at ease. Always at ease.
Always easy.
Especially, easy company. No, that's inappropriate. Stolen valor, all that. Today's guest is... I just went into introduction mode there.
Bring it in. Bring him in.
Blake Buettner from Worn and Wound.
Ooh, lovely crew over there.
Many places before that, including Andy Green. What do they call? What were we like? Blake was in the freshman class of Hodinkee, like with me back in 2000 and something, over a decade ago.
Whew, an OG.
Yeah, so really good to, I sort of followed him on the gram and caught up with his life and stuff. It's those weird sort of things of people you feel like you've known for a long time but never met.
Now we have. We had a lovely chat to him.
Yeah, great to have a chat. Before we get into Blake and the goodness that is Worn and Wound, what has been going on?
What has been going on, Felix? Well, we both got the new Apple Watch Series 7. So I rolled my 6 off the wrist and put this on. Slightly bigger.
Yeah, definitely bigger. So what else is new about it? Slightly bigger, slightly thicker sapphire.
Tougher. So when I bang it into things, it won't crack. Although I got to say the 6 was very tough. Like I hit some stuff with it, and it was not.
So apparently,
a single scratch on
it. In the briefing, they were saying that's because they've made it thicker in the middle. Like increase the thickness of it, and it's slightly curved, so you can see a little bit of screen from the profile, so you don't have that hard on and off if you're looking down, which I guess makes a difference. The other thing that I find a big change is you can finally send a text. There's an on-watch keyboard.
Yes, okay.
I've had limited success with that, to be honest, because I have, as you like to say, meat hook fingers. But it's theoretically possible.
Oh, wow, there is that. I didn't even know that the keyboard was on there. You used to have to do voice message or individual letters swiping. Oh, that's cool. I'll have to test it out.
The screen, that's what you get with a bigger screen. You get, they've finally thought it's okay to put a keyboard on there. But Andy, I've been thinking about this watch and the Apple Watch in general, because I've still got the previous generation sitting on my desk, unlike you, not on my wrist, I'll be honest. I've worked out that they're basically Rolex.
Why and how?
Evolution, not revolution. Like this, it's staying the same. Like the fundamentals are. It's they're not messing with that.
There's very
all-day
little
battery
difference,
life. It's the same form factor, but there's slight improvements. Like the slightly thicker screen. There's the keyboard. Like these are the equivalents of moving from a 40mm case to a 41mm case, and slightly tweaked geometry and an improved bracelet. All that sort of stuff.
Because I don't think. I know it's 45. We've got the 45mm, and the 6 I had was 44. But I don't think that the chassis, as they call it, has changed. I think the screen is just bigger, so slimmer, a smaller bezel.
Yeah, I mean they'll be minor, incremental improvements. For me, that's quite interesting because this is the first time I've worn an aluminium one. I've previously only had steel or ceramic.
Oh yeah, the aluminium's cool.
And I'm into it. It's like a dark green. They've got colours now as well. We should mention that. There's dark green. But the other thing for me that I've not tried on, and you've been a big fan for a while, are these, here, I'm going to do an audio grab.
Oh.
What's that? What's that the sound of?
That's the little strap, the little self-magnetized
That's the Sport Loop, I believe.
Oh, is that the Sport Loop?
Yeah, it's a Velcro. I love it.
Velcro.
I want those on really regular watches.
Yeah, I mean, the Apple straps are fantastic. I've got the a green Sport Loop, which is like a silicon loop that you just kind of stretch to get over your wrist, and it is so comfortable. Like if someone made this for a Submariner, it's going on and it's never coming off.
Yeah. So, and how about you? I imagine you've got living its full life on your wrist. Is it living up to all your hopes and dreams?
I mean, so far I've only noticed that it's slightly bigger screen, and the straps definitely feel better. Other than that, I can't really comment. Because it's such a small differences from the 6.
And for me, I think it's also it's not living its best life because I'm basically just at home. Like, I'm not doing much with it. I've always got the phone with me. It's not the optimal experience to be, testing it out for me. Hey, speaking of Apple, Have you heard about a woman named Susan Kerr or Carr?
No, I have not.
Well, neither had I until I
Uh-huh.
saw a picture on Instagram of someone looking like 80s normcore in New Balance and Levi's in a grey top. This woman, turns out, has had a profound influence on my life, and I suspect your life as well.
Why is that?
She's a graphic designer and artist who was a really early employee at Apple. So she came onto Apple in 1983, and she basically sort of co-created Apple's visual identity and user interface.
Huh.
So I don't know if you used Apple back in the day, but things like the paint bucket, the lasso, the trash can, they're all her creations.
Inventors.
Like all those icons that she did the original iconography. She was the woman that sort of opted with the Chicago font on Apple.
Oh yeah.
Like as a the visual language of like the Apple Mac was largely informed by her.
Amazing.
The happy sad Mac, the error message with the bomb, other stuff like the classic Windows solitaire deck.
Did she do the bouncing ball?
I don't know.
Have to find out.
But yeah, so she worked at Apple for a long time. Then she worked at Microsoft, IBM, Facebook, like hugely important stuff. Just in a really small way, like these little things that have become so like that paint bucket icon. Everyone knows what it does, but to come up with that, I find kind of amazing. So she is a fairly interesting person to read about. You can buy a print, and we can also get. She did the watch. Like I don't know if you remember on when you saved something back in the day on a Mac, you got a little watch icon. She did that, so maybe we can get some for the office.
I wonder, Netflix documentary coming.
Oh, you reckon?
Probably. It's niche enough and interesting enough.
Yeah. Like, and she was like, employee number 10 at Steve Jobs' next company. So it's funny, like you think of Apple and Mac and you think of, Johnny Ive and Mark Newson and those guys, but Susan Kerr, she should be up there.
SK.
Big dog.
Oh, interesting. Fascinating. You always have such good happenings, Felix. I have been watching season 3 of You on Netflix.
Oh, I saw the trailer.
Have you watched season 1 and 2?
I don't know if I've watched season 2. I watched season 1, and my initial reaction to the trailer was like, "What? How is it?" Like, I think I've missed season 2, and because it seems like a lot has changed.
A lot has changed. I think I'm like 3 episodes in. It's just one of those shows you can't stop watching, and you kind of feel a little bit dirty watching it.
It's like popcorn.
It is popcorn. Yeah, a little bit greasy. Yeah, but you can't. Yeah, you can't stop.
Very enjoyable.
Yeah, so recommend checking You out if you're looking for a binge this weekend coming.
Yeah,
do you know what else?
I've actually, we had a little bit of a HR issue earlier in the week, didn't we, Andy?
Yeah, I've just been keeping secrets from you.
Yeah, I mean, you've done some on the side brand deals that haven't been endorsed.
Maurice Lacroix. So you sent me an article, I think it was a Cool and Pat article about a new ML ambassador named Simon Nagura. Nagura?
Sure.
He's a free runner.
Simon.
And I think he's part of like the urban tribe.
Okay.
Parkour, all that sort of stuff. And yeah, we look alike. You sent it to me. I had a bit of a laugh. And then it popped up in our Discord, which everyone should join. And someone there then shared the same article. And I thought I was being set up, but I wasn't. So
it genuinely looks like you. Like
looks a lot like me. So
a lot of it is the glasses. Maybe you've got the same because you've connected now on Instagram, haven't you?
Yeah, we're like we're long lost brothers. So
maybe you should find out if he's wearing the same frames as you.
I should ask him. It had a very similar frame. People thought it was me with a weave. Don't blame them. He's a very good looking guy.
Sure,
so.
you and a kimono hanging out on the Parisian rooftops. You broke the travel bans.
Yeah, so anyway, I posted a picture on Instagram or a couple of pictures and said I'd found my long lost twin, and he noticed and he agreed. So that was pretty funny in the end.
Well, maybe we should get him on the pod. Do some. We can get some Maurice Lacroix sponsorship going on, and
we'll see.
Get some parkour.
We do have a sponsor today.
Oh, we do. Yes.
So let's get into that.
Yep.
This week, we are pleased to have the wonderful Nomos Glasute back as our sponsor. They've just released some really funky new takes on the Autobahn. Let's get into it.
Okay, Andy. So the Autobahn was first released in 2018 as an automotive-inspired design that sounds miles away from the sleek, pared-back look of Nomos. But
Ooh.
this is not a sporty chronograph. It's a sleek and sophisticated take on the genre that plays with colour, shape, and line in surprising ways. With bold curves and depths, it's a fascinating exercise in dial design, and the reference to the dash gauge is tastefully done. Now, Andy, the Autobahn was designed by Werner Eislinger, a renowned German designer who lent his creative flair to these 3 limited edition director's cuts.
Love it. But before we talk about those 3, Felix, I've been wearing a regular production Autobahn for the last few weeks. In fact, the Midnight Blue model. And I love the balance of the dial with the loom up top and the sectored date wheel down at 6 o'clock. Its elongated shape flows beautifully up the nicely curved dial and into that unmissable blue ring of Superluminova. It sits really nicely at 41 millimeters. There's a present, but it's still a really slim case at just 10.5 millimeters. In addition, that woven textile strap is really comfortable on the wrist.
And of course, Andy, the new limited editions have the same case dimensions, but they're bringing some heat in the strap department.
Tell me more, Felix.
All right. These 3 limited editions are in effect a 3-way street. A3, A7 and A9, they're each named for major German freeways. They stand out with very fresh new colourways and a retro fantastic bracelet. The A3 is in white, orange and red, A7 blue and yellow, and A9 in black and grey. It's very fun and reminiscent of German cars from the 60s and 70s. Which brings us, Andy, to the bracelet.
Absolutely. It's a really awesome 70s inspired rally style bracelet with a Nomos deployment clasp. It's a real vibe and another neat Werner Asslinger touch.
100% Andy. To me, these watches really show off Nomos's confidence with bold designs and colour, and those incredible 3D dials and smart colour choices, not to mention the fun loom. Andy, which is your pick?
Oh, it's a tough pick, but I'm drawn to the yellow and the blue. But I do think there's something really unique about the black on grey.
Look, I'm with you on the yellow and blue. That would be my choice.
Okay, Felix. So each of these watches is powered by the Neomatic DUW 6101 caliber, which has been adjusted to chronometer standards, and each watch is limited to just 175 pieces each. They retail at 6,760 Australian dollars. It's worth noting that those super cool bracelets will be unique to these editions.
Find out more at nomos-glasuta.com. That's nomos-glasuette.com. You can also buy it on the site, as well as online retailers like Mr. Porter, as well as your local authorised dealer.
Alrighty, Felix, let's get back to the show. Mr. Buettner is waiting.
All right, Andy, enough of the Autobahn. Let's turn off and get onto Worn and Wound Drive and pull into Blake Buettner's house. I don't know. That was a weird maps analogy there. But
White picket fence second on the left. Let's go.
Yep. Today's guest is the managing editor of Worn and Wound, which is our favourite place to learn about watches, particularly watches we can actually afford. Blake Buettner has a long history in the watch business. In fact, we cut our teeth together at the very early days of Hodinkee, which, you know, in a previous decade, maybe even century. Since then, he's been all over the shop and popped up at places like StockX's or Watch Division. So it's a pleasure to have you on OT, the podcast, Blake.
Felix, thank you for the intro. And it's really my pleasure to be here, guys.
Now, I think I'll probably kick things off. Blake, what was the last watch that you saw, maybe just a press release or in person, that excited you?
Ooh, that excited me. Well, I guess this is a good timing to be asking that question because we're just off of the the Geneva Watch Days, right, last week. So there's lots of really fun watches to see there. But I will echo, I'm sure a lot of people had the same feeling about this Chapek watch. And I'm not sure if I get the pronunciation on that right. But I know all of us over at Worn and Wound have kind of been geeking out over that watch over the past week. And just it's a non-traditional brand, as in like it's not one of the classic like Swiss brands. It's a brand that's kind of like doing its own thing and plowing its own path. And that was a watch that was exciting for me to see released. But the last watch that got me like really like, ooh, I would like to have one of those is the Urwerk like UR100 watches. I like all the variants of that watch a great deal. I know you just gave this intro about Worn and Wound being this value driven, and here I go just like blowing it out of the water.
I mean, there's not to sort of bury the question there, but there is can a watch be value at a higher price point like Urwerk?
Yeah, look, I think it's in particularly that JPEG that I mentioned. I think that's a lot of watch for the money for what you're getting. The Rattrapante, um, I forget what's it called, the Antarctic
Yeah. So,
Antikythera, something like this.
yeah.
And it's I think it's what, maybe under 50 grand, around 50 grand, something like that. Still a load of money, no doubt, but I feel like it's a lot of watch for the money. Maybe it says something about this day and age in watch collecting that we look at watches like that and call them a good value. Maybe that's not such a healthy thing, but you know what? Like I I enjoy this hobby and I enjoy a lot of watches like that without feeling like I have to own it to really enjoy it. But I like that these things exist, and I like seeing creators out there doing things like that.
Yeah, that's very cool. I mean, the Chapek is awesome. They're certainly making waves over the last few years. Before we get too far into the watches, so Felix has mentioned that you guys have a bit of a history dancing around each other in the industry, but you've been on the Worn and Wound team for a year now. How are you liking it?
Oh, I like it a lot. I've known I've known Blake and Zach for a long time, and I've always enjoyed them quite a bit. They're very sweet guys, and I always have appreciated how they go about things. So it felt like a really organic fit over there. And I think how we think about watches is very much aligned in that. The things that make this hobby interesting to us are very much aligned in that it's maybe not so much like what celebrity is wearing what or what this is realizing at auction, but more the art of it, the originality of it, and just the small brands, the interesting people, the stories, all that kind of thing that we really like to dig into, like regardless of price point. And I think that's why we're not afraid to go into like some of the micro brand space and say, hey, look, there's a lot of really exciting and interesting things going on here. So it felt like a really just natural fit, and I've really enjoyed my first year there.
Amazing. And how did you end up at Worn and Wound? What's your actual background? Sort of, how did you even find yourself into entering into the watch industry?
Oh, so that goes. I mean, that goes way back. I went to. I'm from Wisconsin. Not to go way back, but like our friends Eric Wind and Jason Heaton, that seems to be like a strange epicenter there of watch people that have emanated from the great state of Wisconsin. And so I went to school there, and I went when I graduated, I headed out to California and started working as a designer, and ended up working with some ad network type places that was doing some work with like luxury brands. And so obviously a lot of watch brands were in the mix, and I had always really liked watches. And I met a guy named Jeff Kuo out in San Francisco, and he was running a brand. I don't know if you guys remember this, called Zetum, Xetum, and we hit it off really well. And I had started just like helping him with his brand, and he actually made the introduction to Ben Clymer of Hodinkee, and that's kind of what really set this whole thing in motion, I guess to say. So, Jeff, if you're out there, thanks, buddy.
Yeah, well, if it's funny you mentioned Zetum, that was the first watch that I bought off off an online review that was done on Worn and Wound.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Wow, Worn and Wound as well, Andy.
Yeah, it was Worn, and I think the first few watches that I bought were based off Worn and Wound articles. So yeah, very interesting.
Hopefully, you weren't disappointed.
I still have it somewhere. I can't remember what the model was, but I don't think they only had like 2 or 3 in the end. But I still, remember the. Oh, geez, I don't even know when that was.
That would have been like 2011, I reckon, Andy.
Yeah, I reckon
about that time. Hey, Andy, this is kind of weird. So the reason, if we were interviewing you on the Worn and Wound podcast, the reason you would be into watches today would be because of Blake, essentially, and Worn and Wound.
Yeah. You're to blame.
Full circle.
Do you know how much money you've cost me over the years?
Yes, yeah. Apologies for that.
Look at it the other way. You wouldn't have met me if it wasn't for Blake.
And priceless. Yeah. Priceless. Amazing.
That brings up a really interesting thing. So, we've talked about Zetum that I suspect a few people will need to Google to remember. The scene for that, like, sort of, air quotes, value micro indie watch has changed a lot in the last 10 or so years. And you've obviously been intimately involved since then. What do you think that change looks like?
Well, it's it's funny because I feel like we went through a period there where there was like genuine concern. All of the drama around ETA and
Yep.
Swatch taking a more um, let's say restrictive maybe approach to controlling their movement, the manufacturing and distribution of their movements. Because back then it was all like the ETA or something like way further down the line. But I've really enjoyed seeing the flourishing of like the availability of other movements, like Salida, and how some of these movements have matured over time, and the kind of watches that you can find them in now, and the whole genre that they've spawned as a result. Uh, and now it's like a completely like on par parody for as far as like respect goes in terms of movement. If you want to get like really into like watch snobbery, like I don't think you really
Mm.
show up at places now and it's got an an SW300 in it, and people like turn their nose down to it because it's not an ETA like maybe in the early days. Like I feel like it's gained enough momentum that there is enough variety and availability of like really great movements that has allowed the flourishing of a lot of really creative and awesome brands to do really incredible things, which is a lot of fun to see. I don't know if you get the same sense of that, but I feel like that's like the catalyst of it.
Yeah, I mean that's a really interesting point. I think there's that sort of snobbery even at the external movement level of sort of like, oh well, what movement does this have? Does it marry up to the price point? What else do you get for the money? And sort of we are seeing that shift, and perhaps it was there was a time there where there was a flood of as we say micro brands, and I'm sure we'll talk about this in a minute, but there was a lot of these new brands emerging, and everyone sort of had access to it, and I think it perhaps it wasn't as special or as valued because anyone could kind of tap into that movement supply. But the scene's changed a lot in the last decade since I first started reading Worn and Wound. But who's winning in the space right now, from sort of the indie brands to I should say micro brands to the bigger brands, in your perspective?
Yeah, I think it probably depends on like what day you'd ask me that question
Yeah.
for what kind of answer I'd give. But I mean, I see a lot of really interesting things out there. I know that recently I've been really impressed by what has been coming out of Paul and Farrer over there in the UK.
Mm.
Mhm.
The whole UK scene right now actually feels like it's really like maturing into this awesome thing that I've loved seeing. I know Christopher Ward like has been around for a while,
Yep.
and I feel like they were in a place that was kind of unsure of itself, but I feel like they're in a much better place now, I guess I'll say. And Fair as well, I feel like they've matured a lot in what they're doing in terms of just like not only like the fit and finish and like sophistication of the design, but just like refining their whole design language, and how it's like now I feel like you see a Fair watch and it has like it's really got a vibe to it that is all its own, which I really appreciate. I think Paul does a great job over there. To even the smaller like Autodromo over here in New York, I really like the work that he's doing. Of course, Bradley, I would love to see like more from him, of course, but
Mm.
it's not like these are huge teams of people, that are have big buildings and all this kind of stuff. It's generally like it's a small thing, and guys like the Tornik Raybill thing and Bill Yao, it's a similar type stuff. It's like a passion for these guys, and they put all of themselves into it, and they haven't really like they by choice just have not scaled up into these huge things.
Mm.
I know Christopher Ward is probably in like a different level because I think they have hit a little bit of that, but I think lately, like Fair has that mono pusher chronograph that they just did, I thought was really sharp. I thought it was a pretty good price. And then in Chicago, you've got Chase of Oak and Oscar doing his thing, and I think he's got a really refined look. And also in Chicago, the Astor and Banks, I think he's up to some really interesting things as well. And I know that it feels like it's finding its footing in terms of where people are in terms of value. I know that Chase just did this the flyback big eye
Mhm.
Jackson, which was pretty cool, and it sold out quick. But I heard a lot of people bickering like, oh, that's really expensive. And then some people are like, oh, are you kidding? It's a great value. It's a flyback chronograph, and it's, whatever, like a few $1,000s. And so it feels like people are still like getting a sense of like where the real value is. And you've got like people from Baltic, and which I love what Etienne is doing over there, and like Laurier, and they deliberately try to stay within a certain price. And then I like seeing brands like be a little more creative and like push the boundaries a little bit more. But it feels like we're still getting a feel for where those like real value areas are.
Yeah, I 100% agree, and I think like Baltic's such a great example of a brand that couldn't have existed 10 years ago. I don't think. And I'd be interested in getting your read on this, because whenever I sort of hold like, Fair as a great example, or or Fears or something else from a smaller, newer brand, what I'm impressed by is it's not the price point, and it's not necessarily, that sort of top-down design. It's the design sophistication, like the case profiles, the angles. There's more work being done there, or it's because there's more possible within that price point. It's like, I get the feeling that 10 years ago you'd sort of send a design off to a factory, probably in China, and you wouldn't have much choice or options. But now it seems you can do a whole lot more for less. Is that just me?
I think that's bang on. I've been just continually impressed by wood. Like that monopusher I just referenced has this like knurling on the case profile that is really incredible. Yeah, I think there's the creativity that you're seeing out there, and then the means of like the access to different production methods, I guess. Like I've not produced a watch, so I can't speak from experience, but yeah, I often find myself like, how did they do that at this price point? And that's a good place to find yourself, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
No, I was just going to talk about Baltic because the brand that came up, it comes up a lot as sort of the, you guys have been in the watch industry longer than I have, but it just sort of triggered a thought. How often do people say, "Hey, would you ever start a watch brand, or would you?" And when you first do it, you're like, "Oh, this is first to get interested in watches." You think, "Oh, yeah, maybe," and then you do it for 15 minutes, and you realize there's far too many watch brands to exist. But Baltic is one of the few really solid success stories that comes to mind of the last few years, and I try to figure it out, right? Because it's every other day I sort of see something on Instagram or a paid ad, and look, the product's really good, the branding's really good, it's got the right amount of support, but I guess, is that what it takes to get cut through as a micro brand? Like, it's the days of sort of Kickstarter and Indiegogo and that crew are sort of
and
probably
forums.
done. Yep. Yeah, and sort of forum based. Like, is that what it takes? Like, you actually need a very serious amount of sort of resourcing to get a micro brand up and running in 2021?
Look, I think that taps into like a whole interesting discussion of like that we are seeing right now of how brands approach like getting these things made, and then how they approach making them available to buyers. And we often see a lot of drama around this. From like the Ming type releases. I don't know what the right answer is there, but like I don't envy them. Like I I certainly am sympathetic with, we are a small operation, and I'm not saying this about Ming, just anybody that's entering the space. Like, how do you know that people are going to like it, and how much resources am I going to put into like developing this product so that it's available for people to buy, without knowing like what kind of a critical mass you have, and like you need that now. Like, brands. I feel like back in the old days, it was more straightforward. You could get like, you could buy your own like sub forum on Watch You Seek or something like that, and then just like dedicate time to interacting with the community and seeing what they want and doing design contests or whatever it is. Now it's I mean, I don't know. It's almost like paralysis for choice. There's so much going on out there. Like you really have to do something to differentiate yourself and your product. So like there's no sure thing that, oh, if I make this number of this watch that I think people are going to want, like I don't know I'm going to sell them all. And but people get really upset if you release a product and only a certain amount of it, and there's not enough for everybody that wants one. Then you end up looking like the bad guy. I don't know. Like it's a tough situation to be in. I don't know if I could do that right now, starting a watch brand, but it's interesting to watch brands like Ming work through this, like in real time.
It is, and it's sort of, it's always been an issue. I think you're right. Like, there's always sort of been, it could be 10 years ago was like, I missed out on the order. Can I get another? There's still been drama, but it does seem to have escalated quickly. Is there a way out of it? Have you, you've been sort of around the space for a bit and maybe thinking about this question. Have you worked out how to solve the problem of supply and demand, Blake?
Well, me. No, I think if I had all those answers, I would be, I don't know, in a different, leading some different industry maybe. But I think, as far as I'm concerned, like it's really just a matter of patience. And I know that sucks because a lot of people don't want that. Like they want to buy it and they want it like immediately. And a lot of like the current like culture kind of his this hype and like FOMO, and it's always like the next thing in the next thing, and it's hard to think about like putting some money down and then just not getting it like immediately. And the Amazons of the world and all that kind of stuff have us all trained to just, what do you mean it's not going to be here tomorrow? This is ridiculous. But when it comes to something like this, I think like whether you like it or not, like a little patience might be required if you want to be in a position to support some of these brands that are quite small and that are doing things that you appreciate. And then like, a part of that is just going to be, a little bit of patience on your end to get what you want.
Yeah, I love that, and I think patience is something that a lot of people forget, and everyone should be used to, right, at this point in time with watches, because you're sort of waiting around for the call. But I think something that Worn and Wound stands for, and is what initially drew me to that site, a decade ago, was the value proposition that micro brands offer, and it's sort of inherent with the that section of watches, right? You're sort of looking at brands that don't have, necessarily a long-standing pedigree or the history or whatever to justify like massive price points, but it's still really well made, and it's sort of inherent to the concept of a micro brand. But when we move out of that space and into like luxury, I don't know what that's defined as anymore, but maybe 5K or over. Can you really have a value watch that costs 10K?
I mean, that's a good question, and I think that will really depend on the individual that is shelling out the money for it, and their definition of it. But I think that these are inherently like products that, I mean, at least at one time, I think people would think about a watch or a purchase like that, a watch that they're going to spend 5,000, 10,000, and up on, as something that they would like keep for the rest of their life, and think about it in terms of like the lifetime value that they're going to get out of it. But now, like I'm more and more, I see a lot more of the watch industry kind of moving into this. Like, there's like every season or whatever, there's like a new batch of releases, and there's all this excitement around, which is great. Like I love seeing all these new watches and all that kind of stuff. But like it's hard to sustain thinking about like I can't buy a new watch every season or every, I mean, I know a lot of us do, and I'm certainly guilty of a lot of that kind of stuff. But I think maybe that's just like, as you mature into the hobby and as the longer that you're around, the more you recognize like what you like, what appeals to you, and every purchase is a little more well considered. But we are not the average buyer that's just like walks into a boutique looking at these things, and I think that that's a person that still does think of this as something that they maybe want to have for the rest of their life, and I think we should think about it in that kind of context.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think it's always easy to forget that we don't represent, on our level of the people on this call, we don't represent the normal watch enthusiast because we all work in the space. But even watch enthusiasts don't represent the normal consumer. One brand I find fascinating to sort of talk about in that sort of, are they value, are they luxury, can they be both, is Grand Seiko, and even sort of Seiko a little bit, because they've changed so much over a fairly sort of short amount of time since they sort of went global a few years ago. They've really sort of pumped the gas on, becoming a luxury powerhouse brand. And I think I was on a press call that said that in the 5 to 10K category in the States, Grand Seiko were the number 4 seller, which which is wild. Are they still,
Yeah.
that sort of, the watch nerd's favorite under the radar, value buy?
Uh, I think in some ways, yes, and I have like kind of varying thoughts on this. Like on one hand, I think um, it's a good thing that people are discovering Grand Seiko because I think they're doing legitimately great stuff that people should be aware of. And every time somebody walks into a Rolex boutique or an AP boutique or whatever, looking for like the hot watch, and it's not there, and they probably have like a poor experience there because they're basically like ignored, or maybe not ignored, but just told like, hey, there's nothing we can do for you.
Yep.
Like those people, they want to go, like, they're like, well, they're going to turn their attention somewhere. So I think a lot of these people are just discovering like other great brands that are doing really great things, and I would categorize Grand Seiko in there, and I think they are doing great things. And Seiko is, they've definitely made some interesting moves over the past couple of years, and I think a lot of their like long time hardcore fans are like, I've seen some consternation there from people who, like they'd swear by like the old, the SKX 007, that kind of stuff, that there's like a cult following of. Like, there isn't anything that really exists like that now. And I think them kind of pushing, like really differentiating between like, all right, you've got like this 5 sports lines that has this kind of stuff, or you can go like up into the prospects and get the SPB, um, the
149 or whatever it is.
divers that we love.
Yeah.
Yeah. And those are all great, but there's this, it's kind of like opened up this gap in the middle there where everyone used to like really feel comfortable with Seiko. So it's kind of like, well,
they're still, for me, for Seiko at least, they seem to sort of be still excelling, but now it's at, I don't know, in US dollars, like $800, whereas before it was $200. They're still a phenomenal offering, but they've just moved upstream a little bit. And the reason I was thinking about Grand Seiko was because the White Birch, I think, is a really, really interesting watch to talk about value with.
I think it's an interesting watch to talk about for a lot of reasons. Have you guys had your hands on one?
Yes,
okay.
Briefly.
Go ahead, and then I want to ask you a few things about
well, yeah. I mean, this is, it's a talking point. So it's what, in Australia, it's around $10K, maybe, $10,000, $11,000, probably the other side of that for the US. For a Grand Seiko, that's, maybe 4,000 more than you'd sort of expect. It's very much in, your sort of Omega Rolex territory. I think it's the clearest expression of where Grand Seiko is going. And I think it's still value, but I'm not sure. I want to see what you think about it.
Yeah, look, I think it is a fantastically built watch, and it is a very interesting watch. The dial is impeccable, of course, and that's that's the first thing that jumps out at you, and it's kind of become their calling card these days, right? And I see a lot of other brands kind of going into that space as well, trying to do interesting things with their dials, and that's great. Grand Seiko does it really, really well, and seeing them in person is quite the experience. And anyone listening, I would absolutely encourage you to try and see one if you can. The White Birch in particular, it's a big step forward, and it's aggressively so. And I think that it's like ruffled the feathers of some of the people who like the like really subtle, beautiful Grand Seiko dials. This is like a smack in the face when you see it, but I still think it's a really beautiful dial. It's well done. Like I'll be that guy and say I prefer it without the date, and I'm not like a, oh my gosh, the date is there, whatever kind of guy. Like I'm largely agnostic when it comes to that kind of stuff. But when it's a dial like this, like I would prefer to just see it like sing on its own.
Yeah.
But that, like, I can get over that kind of stuff. I like that they moved the they don't have the power reserve on there, which is great. And the movement, I think, is really interesting. It's beautiful. It looks a little European in finishing almost. And just what it is. It's a high beat. It's that dual escapement. Like there's a lot of really interesting things going on with that watch. And if somebody spent the money on it, like worth every penny, I would say. Where my issues land with it, the 22 millimeter lug span in the bracelet that does not really taper, are where I have real issues with that watch in when it comes to like I think it's a beautifully wearable watch. It's a great head of the watch, but in terms of like the proportionality of it, there's something off about it that I think earlier Grand Seikos have had, and to me, it feels like they're still like finding their way around that kind of thing. And in particular, like their bracelet game, I don't think is like quite up to snuff from like an aesthetic perspective, even if they're well made. But that's the kind of like I would like to see a little more finesse there, and that makes it feel like a much more aggressive watch than I think it really should be, in my opinion. Did you guys notice that about this watch?
Yeah, I think for me, I can echo what you say. I didn't notice the 22 bracelet on this in particular, but I think that general statement about Seiko, or Grand Seiko rather, needing to sort of step up their bracelets is true. I think it is one of the few areas that they sort of lag behind their competitors in. But what I really noticed, beside the movement, beside the dial, the thing that impressed me most about this was the case profile, which is a lot more. It's a lot more mature.
Yeah.
It's a lot slimmer, and I think it's that expression for me of that sort of next phase of Grand Seiko's design.
Yeah, yeah, I 100% agree. It's a lovely case on the wrist. It's and maybe we've just been doing this like for too long and seeing too many watches, and you just get like cynical about some things. I honestly, I try not to be. But this was a watch like I was wearing it around, and every time I would catch a glimpse of it on my wrist with like the underside of my wrist turned up, it looked like I was wearing a massive watch, right? Like it's a really wide bracelet all the way down, and maybe I've just become accustomed to like the new Speedmaster bracelet has a lovely taper to it that goes from like down to like 20 to 16, like a 4 millimeter taper, 5 millimeter taper, something like that. And the new Explorer 124 270, it's the same thing. Like maybe I'm just like used to that. So a bracelet that like stays like a full like 20 millimeters all the way across, I think it goes from 22 to 20. It felt really strange on my wrist, um, and that like that's one thing that I want to see them like really clean up and tidy up. And I think that's like one of the things that's holding me back from putting a Grand Seiko in my own collection. That and like just their like I don't really know what they are. And not that it needs to be something like, is it a luxury sport watch, dress watch? I don't like, I have a hard time placing it in my head and like where and how I would wear it within the kind of clothes I wear every day. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do, and I find it with this whole Grand Seiko, but predominantly Grand Seiko chat. Felix loves to sort of talk about their prominence in the market, especially in the US. And it's sort of a brand that has come leaps and bounds in the last few years. Limited editions, their pricing is certainly going up and getting a lot firmer, and they're sort of on this really impressive trajectory. And you talked to the downsides of particular model is sort of, if we talk about the bracelet or whatever. But what do you think the greatest threat to Grand Seiko is in terms of kind of continuing on their trajectory that they are on?
I think it's going to be themselves, and I think it's going to be really um, like I'm around this stuff all day, every day, and I have a hard time like kind of categorizing it, how explaining like in clear language like what it is. Like outside of the kind of like hyper fine details of the inspiration from this specific region of Japan and the nature here, and which is great, and I fully buy into that. It's beautiful, but like an average consumer that walks in and thinking about like, okay, well, I go to the Rolex boutique and they've got like professional sport watches and whatever that means, but I think it's easier to understand like what that is and how that fits into like their lifestyle. And I feel like it's a little bit murkier when it comes to Grand Seiko. And I know that they have sport watches, but they don't seem like nearly as well defined as maybe some of their other stuff, like these White Birches. And like I like them, but I think it's a hard thing to easily communicate to just like the average consumer. Like, what is it other than just like a luxury watch?
Hey Andy, can I answer your question as well?
Of course.
I think that the thing that will hold Grand Seiko back, so to speak, is Grand Seiko. But I think more specifically, it will be a lack of focused decision making at the top levels, like from their marketing and sales strategy, from their product releases, especially. Like, depending on the year, you might get 5 or 6 different, sort of marketing focuses from the brand, and depending on the region, like it's a very broad sweep, and that works for someone like, maybe, I was about to say Hublot, but even they still focus on 1 or 2 models. Like Grand Seiko, it's, I've joked with other media colleagues in the past that, like, it's a roll of the dice what you're going to get from Grand Seiko. Like, is serious reserved Grand Seiko going to show up, or is it going to be wacky, crazy, made with a Gundam design Grand Seiko? Like, and neither of those are bad.
Maybe that's part of it. Maybe that's...
It can't be. I think if they want to, go into Rolex and Omega territory, which I think they do, they need to sort of be a bit more, considered about what they're doing. And in the States especially, I think they're doing that. Like, but globally, I'm not sure it's always the case.
Alrighty, so beyond watches, what change that you've observed since you've been writing about watches pleases you the most? And on the opposite side of that, what irritates you the most about watches?
Oh boy, well, what pleases me the most is seeing a lot more brands pay attention to the practicality of their case dimensions and their cases. I feel like we went through some pretty hairy territory there in terms of like size trends and all that kind of stuff. And in like me personally, I don't have like gigantic wrists, and so I guess you see a lot of people kind of go into the vintage realm to find something a little bit smaller, but it's not just like diameter. And I noticed that a lot more brands are starting to pay attention to the thickness of their cases, the lug to lug dimension, and just kind of the spaces in between that make it a watch that you want to wear more often. Really as simple as that, right? Because I feel like there's a difference between like I bought this great watch and it just kind of sits there because it's not all that comfortable, but I like looking at it, and I bought this watch that I really like, and I really like wearing it, and so I wear it all the time. And when you do that, I think it sounds obvious to say, but like you're creating a lot more great experiences in that watch, and I think you're a lot more likely to hold on to it for a longer period of time. So I like seeing that. I like seeing brands pay attention to that stuff, and I'm sure you guys have noticed it there. Like even when you get press releases these days, a lot of brands will like list those dimensions there, and that was like very much not the case not too long ago. Do you remember this, Felix? I don't know if this is something that we even thought about back in the day.
Yeah, the lug to lug. Where did that come from?
Oh man, yeah.
That's a game changer.
Yeah.
Get the calipers out.
Yeah, exactly. And I think just the overall practicality of these things like goes a long way. And I know that there's and probably like my gripe is seeing. I know this hobby has grown a lot. So you see a lot of different things, and you see a lot of different people come into the hobby for like with around various like types of motivation around them. And I guess like maybe one of the irritating things is just seeing how the product itself, the watches itself, the makers themselves, the stories behind them get kind of lost in this like environment of like how it's going to perform on social, or what it means to my friends, or like this is a luxury thing. And I firmly believe that like watches are like how that you use them, and if you use it like a tool watch or like a whatever, then that's what it is. And even if it is expensive, so I would like to see a little bit more focus on like, well, what actually makes that watch interesting. And it's not because like some basketball player wore it to some event, like that doesn't really tell me anything about the watch. So I would like to see more focus kind of put on like the people doing interesting things and creative things out there, and people that maybe enter the hobby under some of this like iffy territory, but maybe I hope they find something stickier there underneath so that they'll stick around.
Yeah, it's a really positive way of putting it, I suppose. And I think we will maybe sort of touch on, watches as investment commodities in a second. But it's always been one of my favorite sort of, I guess, articles at Worn and Wound is the 3 watches under $5,000. I think it's a great challenge. And a little while ago, you did one, Blake. It was pretty great. You had not to tell you your own job, you did a Speedy, classic Seiko diver, and an Autodromo, which I think is a great way to spend, $5K. If you could do it again today, would you change it, or were there any sort of watches that almost made the list?
I think at its core it would probably be about the same. And I know I took some flack because I think the Speedy is maybe a little optimistic on the pricing.
I'm sure you've had it for a while.
Yeah, exactly. And like, I don't know, like you remember back in the day, like you could get a run of the mill
$1,500,
Speedmaster for,
$2,000.
Not that much. So like in my head, that's just kind of what they are.
Yeah, exactly.
But the Autodromo Group B is like one of my favorite all time watches. I absolutely love it. It's like wholly original. It's like I vibe with that kind of like retro race car, like the Group B era, like. That's my jam, all of it. I like it. And you don't really see other watches that look a whole lot like this. It's really thin. It's easy to wear. And I like Bradley a lot too. He's enthusiastic about what he does. He's a big car fan. And then like, what was it? The Seiko diver, of course, like I most days of the week, that's probably what I've got on my wrist. I might slot in something like the Sinew 50. I've got it on right now.
Mm-hmm.
Like I wear that watch quite a bit. And I really like that watch as well. But I think they all are like pretty good for the kind of like environment that I spend most of my time and the type of clothes I find myself wearing most of the time. And I don't feel like out of place ever in any of them. So I'm not like the fanciest person in the world. So they all fit like my lifestyle pretty well. So I think it would be pretty close to what you see there. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, a brand I want to talk to you about that came into the news, I think it was just last week or the week before, but it's Oris. And, it's a brand that fits right into the wheelhouse of Worn and Wound, maybe at that top end. But they had a press release recently announcing that they have achieved carbon neutral status. Now, I think Felix and I will agree, and I'm sure you will as well, that they're pretty authentic with their approach to, corporate responsibility and kind of, doing things that are better for the environment, or at least, neutralizing it.
Yeah.
Do you see consumers wanting more of this?
I feel like consumers will be demanding more of this from every product that they buy and just how they consume things in general. And my feeling is that the kind of stuff that we're seeing from them, which is great, we see Christopher Ward kind of delving into this territory as well. I think they're both partnered with this hashtag Tide place recently, repurposing ocean-bound plastics to be convert them into kind of like raw premium materials, which is good. And I every time I get a press release that's like just talking about this kind of thing, I always kind of it feels like this should be the ante to play. Like it feels like this should be the default position of like every watch brand. Like when I get some crazy packaging or fabric strap or whatever it is, like I would like to just know that, of course it was made in a sustainable manner. I shouldn't need to get a press release about it. Like that's just how business is done these days. And my feeling is that the consumer is just going to demand that it is at some point. That it's not like, well, we're environmentally conscious and we do this with our straps, or this one particular part of our supply chain is this. Like it should be the whole thing, and it should just be par for the course, basically, is my feeling on it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's absolutely true, and I think you don't need to be convinced that it's going to be a big thing if everyone from Richemont to Oris and brands in between it are doing it. Like clearly, it's happening. Now, Blake, we've talked about sustainability, we've talked about value watches, but I want to talk about the value of watches, in particularly. If I wanted some sort of convenient platform to buy and trade them, what would you say about that? That was a really weird question about what did you do at StockX and what's going on with professional watch trading.
Yeah. So so I was at StockX for 3 years. I helped out in building their luxury vertical. Now I think it's more of all kind of under this like collectibles type of umbrella there. And back when I was there, when it started, it was literally just the sneakers and then handbags and watches. Now they've grown into a whole another thing entirely now, and they've done a great job of doing that, of course. And I've got nothing bad to say about my experience there. I met a lot of really incredible people, and they kind of pulled me into the sneaker world. And I realized that there was a lot more crossover between like sneaker people and watch people than I ever really imagined that there was. I remember the week that we went live with watches on StockX. I had no idea what was going to happen. I knew we had tons of like sneaker people on there, but like one of the longtime sneaker sellers listed Chronometry Blue like that first week,
Damn.
and and I think that right off the bat showed me like, oh, there's some like, and that's not a watch you just like get
Happened
into.
to
Like you got to
buy.
know you got to know watches, right?
Yeah.
Like in the and this was I think 2017, so I think he listed it for 18, 20 grand or something like that, like what they were going for back then, and which is kind of crazy to think about. And of course, like it got snatched up within like a week or something, and I think it was another sneaker person that had bought it. But this showed me like, oh, there's a lot of people that are really into watches in this hobby, and that's not a crossover that I had thought of before. So it was really fun getting to explore that and really kind of get outside of the like this is a stereotypical like watch you seek dweller,
Mm-hmm.
watch meetup guy, but a lot of other people doing a lot of other really cool things are also into this hobby. And maybe they're doing it in a way that's different than how I do it or even knew that was going on. So that was a really fun thing for me to discover and to bring other like new people into sneaker people into. It was a really fun adventure. So I was there in Detroit with my family for 3 years doing that. And it was a lot of fun to do before moving here to New York. But I think right now, just kind of the overall landscape, it feels like, a lot of people want a piece of what's going on. I think there's a lot of like, arbitrage opportunities around every corner seemingly. And the popularity of social platforms, I guess like Facebook
Mm.
and Instagram allow like they kind of give you the tools like anybody to do this if they if they have access to liquid inventory basically, right? And but I that's a whole kind of bird's nest to get into. I think we all know people that like we recommend, like the
Mm.
John Reardons of the world, the Eric Wins of the world, and people like that. And there's a lot of them out there. Of course, I don't want to just say those two, but yeah, it's wild. It's like the wild wild west out there these days. And as far as like are people like paying these prices? Is that what's pushing them up, or is it? Yeah, I don't know. And that's a whole like discussion there waiting to happen. That I don't know if you guys want me to speak too long on, but
No, that's fine. That's fine. It's one of the many rabbit holes that watch people and
Endlessly frustrating for me.
yeah,
yeah, it is frustrating. And look, like there's a lot of just enthusiasts out there that want these watches for the right reasons. Not that there's any wrong reason, I guess, but not to be like too harsh, but you want people that like understand this stuff, or even if they don't, that like appreciate it and want to get into it for those reasons to have access to this stuff, and it's like impossible to get into. But at the same time, again, it's good for other brands out there that maybe aren't in the like on the hype train. That's there's a lot of really cool things happening in this hobby that aren't a part of like what you see on celebrities' wrists.
yeah. Well put. Well put. Hey, speaking of other hobbies, it's something we want to ask you about, both Felix and I. We know
Yeah.
that you're into your mechanical keyboards, and if we were just talking about rabbit holes,
Yeah.
we're falling into it as well. But what's the appeal there for you?
There's something like really so I guess it's a couple things. There's something really therapeutic about actually like building a keyboard.
Yeah.
And this maybe sounds like really weird to people that are listening right now. But uh the level that you can get into it in terms of where you get like the individual switches that you maybe like
Mm.
open up and put a different spring inside and put a certain kind of lubrication on, and then hunt for the types of caps and you the kind of PCB that you want that you can program in the way that you like it, and then the case parts. And I mean, it is definitely a rabbit hole that I've tried to kind of like get myself out of a little bit, but I think like actually building, there's something like really therapeutic about it, and it kind of gets me in a good headspace. It takes me out of like the noise of everyday life. But additionally, like I'm a pretty like I went to design school. I really like putting these things together in terms of like what it's going to look like and the color schemes and the color of the case and the caps and all that kind of stuff, and then sourcing it, which can be a challenge. But I like, look, this is something that like I use every single day, that I think most of us use every single day, that we don't really think about that much. But maybe we should. And it's something that's right in front of us. We're touching all the time. There's something like very personal about it that I don't. It's like easy to overlook, but there's something immensely satisfying about doing it yourself. And then you want more, and then you have like 15 keyboards, and you're like, what am I doing? What am I doing with all these keyboards? But I tell you what, though, there's like a whole like resale thing. Like it's the same in keyboards too, with like rare early keyboards. TGRs especially. Are they command big money, $3, $4, $5, $6,000 in the open market. So it's, I mean, yeah, the craziness is everywhere.
Yeah, that's true.
You guys build your own keyboards? You guys have your own keyboards?
Yeah, I've built a couple now. I actually built Felix one on the weekend.
Oh, did you?
You did?
Yeah.
Is this Andy? I didn't know this,
No.
Blake.
Yep, surprise.
Wow, it's my birthday coming up.
Oh, look at that. Okay.
Gets out the bag.
Well, I haven't built any because I've got Andy to build them for me, apparently. But I only just bought a mechanical during sort of lockdown because my laptop keyboard event just gave me the shits, to be honest. So I started off with a Keychron because I wasn't sure if I was going to like the whole vibe, and I'm happy I did that because I do. I've been enjoying it a lot. So
yeah,
actually, yeah, for us on the audio, it's been good getting quieter switches and sort of playing around with the dampening to kind of be able to kind of tap away whilst we're recording. And
I still can't. Mine's too. I think you hear it too much.
Well, not anymore, mate.
Hang on, listen to this.
Andy, what? Oh yeah, you can. Andy, what switches did you use for Felix's board?
Novel keys for his ones. So I think they're cream. I'll have to double check. And then we've done it's a Kara with
hey, don't tell me the colours. I don't want to know.
I'm not going to tell you the colours.
I want some surprise.
Yeah, it's a whole other world. But before we go, Blake, what we like we said at the start, we'd like to get all of our guests to give us a recommendation on something they've been enjoying. Could be something you've been reading, watching, listening to, gazing out the window at. But what have you got that I think the listeners might enjoy?
Sure. So, well, I guess there's a couple things. There's a book that I'm just about finished with that I've quite enjoyed. It's called The Scout Mindset by Julia Gailiff. And I found out about this from a podcast that I also really enjoy, which is called Mindscape with Sean Carroll, who is a physicist, and he can go kind of deep on like physics and math type stuff, but well worth a listen if you're curious about that kind of stuff. I would highly recommend.
Love it.
Yeah, cool. We'll definitely look into those. Andy, do you have any recommendations? Just mixing us up.
Well, I'm rewatching Ted Lasso, so I've just rewatched season 1 in anticipation of season 2. I don't know if you're across that show, Felix, but check it out.
I mean, Ted Lasso is literally the highlight of my week at the moment. I've got
I'd forgotten the season finale of season 1, like who wins that match. I don't know how, but I was just like, it was like rewatching it for the first time.
Blake, have you got onto Ted Lasso yet?
I have not. No,
mate.
Is there something I need to try? Okay.
Yeah, you got to pony up for an Apple TV subscription.
Okay.
Yeah,
but do it for a month. Just watch it all. It's the best thing. Especially, it's just very nice and wholesome.
Okay.
And yeah. We can go on for another whole episode about that, but we probably shouldn't. Blake, it has been an absolute pleasure talking to you. And
what a treat.
Yeah, a treat. So, getting your take on watches and everything else in between. We'll have to get you back on at some point.
Would love that. Felix and Andy, the pleasure was mine. And we'll pick back up on the Ted Lasso conversation. You guys can swing on to our podcast too.
Nice.
Sounds great. Alrighty, Felix. Well, that was a lovely chat with Mr. Buettner. What a guy. What a gentleman.
Gotta love a guy that loves his mechanical keyboards.
Yeah, just an all-rounder gentleman. We'll definitely have him back on. Thank you to today's episode sponsor. We couldn't do it without you, Nomos Glass Sute. Make sure you hit their website and check out the new club. New
Autobahn as well.
New Autobahn.
Check out the Autobahn. I mean, if they've got a new Ahoy, check that out too.
Yeah, whatever new stuff they're doing, it's going to be great. Join our Discord. We'll link that up. Felix, email, Instagram, all that sort of stuff, please.
OGthepodcast@gmail.com. That is where you will want to, email any sort of commercial offerings if you're coming from Maurice Lacroix and you need a fill-in for
any of our lookalikes,
Simon.
doppelgangers.
I don't know. I don't want to go down my lookalikes.
I found him.
Well, ot.podcast on Instagram. That's where you can tag us in pictures of Simon. And, of course, please remember to like, subscribe, share, follow everywhere, and tell people. I think that word of mouth. I think we want to sort of do the town crier model. Like, so if you're in your local shopping centre, just go around a little bit of, hey, what are you doing, Vote to the podcast?
Email us. We'll supply a bell. Express post. All right, guys. See you next week.